in here. Just want to welcome you to our fourth topic meeting in our comprehensive plan series. We'll be getting started in just a couple minutes here. We're going to wait and see if a few more people will join us, and then we'll get started. So thanks a lot, and we'll be getting going in just a minute here. Great, thank you, April. So good evening, everyone. My name is Phil Chafing. I am the project manager for the Stantec team that is happy and excited to be working with the City of Saco and the Planning and Economic Development Department on this comprehensive plan process. And I want to introduce Bob Hamblin, City Planner, to give us a little welcome.
Thank you, Phil. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being with us on the fourth of four topic-driven meetings. We've talked about transportation, we've talked about housing, in all important topics. It's possible, depending on what lens one is looking through, that this evening's topics of sustainability and resiliency are as or more important than any others. I'm excited to hear some of our speakers tonight. Once we considered who should we invite, who can provide us a local or regional insight into what's happening on these topics. These folks are doing amazing things out there. So I think Southern Maine and probably Maine statewide has a lot on the ball in terms of sustainability, energy efficiency, resiliency, et cetera. So looking forward to an interesting discussion. Thanks again for being here. And Phil, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Bob. So just again to welcome everyone, thank you for your time tonight. During the course of the next 90 minutes, we want to share a brief presentation, kind of provide a little bit of background on where we're at in the comprehensive plan process and our shared vision and principles, provide a little bit of background on the topics of sustainability and resiliency, and interested in a little polling exercise to kind of hear what you think of when you are thinking about sustainability and resiliency. As Bob mentioned, we have a panel discussion we're excited to hear from, and then we will have, hopefully at least 20 to 30 minutes at the end for breakout group discussions to hear more from you. So we're really excited for our meeting tonight. But I just launched a poll that folks should be able to see. Just a quick 2 questions. How you heard about tonight's meeting and how many of these comprehensive plan meetings you have attended. So if you can just click those buttons and fill that out, that would be great. And while you're doing that, I wanted to provide an update on where we're at in the planning timeline. We got started with this process back in the fall, collecting some data on existing conditions and trends in Saco, speaking with a number of different stakeholders and city staff and others. We had our public kickoff meeting in January, where we presented the findings from that and had a chance to hear from some people, which was then followed in February by some online exercises and polls to learn more about people's kind of thoughts and priorities about where Saco is today and where you want to be in the next 10 to 15 years. And right now we're in kind of the topic exploration phase, beginning to really kind of continuing at this point to dig into some more detail on the key topics that make up the comprehensive plan. And this will then help us to develop eventually the recommendations and the priorities that will become the draft plan, which we will share for review in the fall, and then moving towards approval of the final plan, probably late this year and into early next year. Thank you everybody for participating in the polling. It looks like most people have heard about this meeting from Saco emails, which is great. And looks like about half of people here have been to most of our meetings, which is great. But we're also very excited to welcome a few people who are just attending their first or second one. So thank you very much. So this vision statement was developed based on what we heard from our kickoff public meeting, from the online polling and exercises we had available in February, and was developed working with our long-range planning committee, which is a group of volunteer citizens and city staff who are working with us as our partners to help guide the development of this plan. And so this vision statement is our shared sense of where, how we see Saco and where we want to be as a community in the next 10 to 15 years. And our, kind of headline statement is Saco, a community for a lifetime. And we go on to talk about, how we think that can be enriched and embodied over the next 10 to 15 years, building on strengths that the city already has, while also, finding other ways to grow and improve and expand. So some of the elements of that I'll highlight. You can read this for yourself here, but that Saco is a welcoming small city that manages its growth to help build a better community for all, and that means a lot of different things, which I'll talk about on the next slide. But it's a city that is preserving its rich historic and natural legacy, while also celebrating the really great special assets that make Saco what it is today, the downtown, cherished beaches, the Saco River, natural open spaces. So that's what we're trying to capture in this vision statement. And then on the next slide, this vision statement is supported by 9 guiding principles. And we've been talking in previous meetings how these principles, while they're each focused on a particular aspect of the comprehensive plan, they're all very much interrelated and they all support one another in different ways. So I won't read through all of these here, but these are the 9 guiding principles that we've been using to kind of structure some of our conversations in these topic meetings, and that we'll also use to inform kind of our thinking and our organization of the policies and strategies and projects that we'll develop and ultimately recommend as we continue on through this comprehensive planning process. And you'll see at the bottom of this presentation will be available online after the meeting, but there's a link there to some more information on the vision and principles and a little explanation of where it came from. So with that, I will hand it over to April Schneider, who is a member of our Stantec team. And while she's going through her first couple of slides, I would encourage everyone, if you can pull up a separate browser window, either on your computer or phone, and go to this website here, menti.com, MENTI.com. She'll explain 2 quick little survey questions we have where we want to hear from you in just a few minutes. So with that, I'll hand it off to April. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. So I'll bring this up again in a moment for everyone. And you can hear me okay, right, Phil? Sound check?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, great. So I want to talk about sustainability and resilience and how we incorporate these topics into comprehensive plans. So what I like to do is I like to think of these topics as lenses through which we view all of the contents of what goes into a comp plan. So on the left side of the screen, you see everything that we're going to be looking at. It's really all the resources required to live in a city, how we move around a city, how the city should grow. And then we apply these lenses, looking through these glasses. So I'll go into more detail about what I mean by that. But first, what I want to do is hear from you. And this is where you come in. So please go to that link again, and you can type in these numbers. I'm really curious, before we get into any of these things, what does sustainability mean to all of you listening into the call? And you can type in, I think I've allowed up to 10 answers. So anything that you want, anything that it means to you, it's really open-ended. And just, you might have to click twice. It's a little finicky sometimes, but just make sure it says your response has been recorded. And I'm going to pull up the word cloud. That should happen in real time. Do let us know if you're having any issues accessing.
Can you give us that number again, April?
Yes, it's 9325-2281. On the first one, I'll ask about sustainability, and then on the next slide, you'll have an opportunity to tell me about what resilience means. So save your responses on resilience for the next one. Reliable. We have one response so far. That's a good one.
People are trying to fill out all 10. It might take just a moment, so.
There we go. Fantastic. Innovative, recycling, compassion. I like that one. That's great.
And for these, April, this is the case where the larger the word, the more often it's being mentioned.
Correct, yes.
So it looks like reuse is one that a couple people have mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Intergenerational, I like that one.
The diversity of responses is very interesting too, though.
Yeah. This is also great because it's foreshadowing a bit everything that I'll be talking about today and our speakers as well. So this is great. You can keep responding and the responses will still get recorded. I'm going to move on to the next one, which is, what does resilience mean? I think I'm going to move on. I can figure out how to change slides. There we go. Okay, great. This is a well-informed audience. Adaptive, great. Okay, great. I think this was a great exercise, and it's just helpful for me to understand where everybody's coming from as we talk through some of these issues. And as we think about the comprehensive plan for SACO, this is really, really great. Okay. So I will go back to the presentation. Sorry, I'm clunky with Zoom. Great. So thank you for sharing all of your responses. For the sake of conversation, I pulled up a couple pretty well understood definitions of sustainability and resilience. The one on the screen here comes from the UN Sustainable City Program, which defines a sustainable city as one that retains the supply of natural resources while achieving economic, physical, and social progress, as well as remaining safe against environmental risks. Resilience, on the other hand, is defined by 100 Resilient Cities, is the capacity of a city to survive, adapt, and grow despite chronic stresses and shocks. And so these terms, stresses and shocks, are common when we're talking about building resilience in a city, and they speak to the idea that cities should build capacity in the face of acute events like the 100-year storm or a pandemic, as well as some of the more slowly building or cyclical events such as food or water shortages. And so building resilience often means establishing the infrastructure to prevent or mitigate risk, as well as developing coping strategies for when something does happen. And I want to just take a moment to apply these two concepts to one idea that I think a lot of people are thinking about, which is climate change. And I'll say that resilience and sustainability go far beyond climate change, but I think this example helps illustrate the difference a little bit. Sustainability in this context might refer to mitigating climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, while resilience, on the other hand, might refer to adapting to the impacts of climate change. And I want to dig into this just a little bit further. On the sustainability end of this spectrum, it's really important for us to understand where greenhouse gas emissions are coming from. On the left side of the screen is a breakdown of Maine's greenhouse gas emissions by sector compared to the US as a whole on the right. So more than half of all emissions in Maine come from the transportation sector, and that is largely from combustion engine vehicles. The other biggest sector is buildings, both commercial and residential, things like heating and cooling your houses. And so it's important to really understand the sources of emissions as we look to develop a means of mitigating them. And reducing across the board in all of these sectors is an imperative, an eventual imperative, but we should start with some of the worst offenders. And that's why it's important to say, look at the transportation sector of a comprehensive plan through this lens. And SACO is starting to take steps in this direction, and we'll hear a little bit more about this later, but City Council passed a resolution to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and prioritize zero carbon solutions for electricity, heating, and transportation, among other things in the resolution. So this is a first step in SACO, and the comprehensive plan is perhaps one of the first concrete opportunities to make movement on this resolution. And then if we move over to the resilient side of the spectrum, so even if we stopped emitting carbon overnight, we'd still face some consequences to an already changed climate. And there are a lot of impacts from climate change. Not all of them are listed here, but the Maine Climate Council is projecting increased average temperatures, which is most pronounced in the winter, actually, which has impacts on snowfalls and water supply. But it's also projecting, like the entire Eastern Seaboard, increases in the frequency and intensity of rainfall events, sea level rise, which impacts coastal communities and also exacerbates coastal storm events, and ocean acidification, which has the potential to impact fishing economies and other ecologies in the ocean. And if we zoom into sea level rise, it's just important to understand there's, like all of the impacts, there's really a range of potential futures. Each of the projections shown in this chart represent different carbon emissions scenarios, the most extreme versions representing essentially unchecked global greenhouse gas emissions, and the lower range representing realistic but dramatic cuts in greenhouse gases. And if we look at a mid-range scenario, the one in green, there's about a 50% probability that sea level rise meets or exceeds this value of 3.9 feet by 2100. And when we plot what that 3.9 feet looks like on a map of SACO, we plotted on top of the daily high tide, average daily high tide. We can see that we'd be seeing every single day an encroachment on a number of places in SACO, but in particular, the low-lying Seaside Avenue and Camp Ellis neighborhoods. But as I said, climate change is really just one theme among many that will apply to a comprehensive plan. And within the sustainability bucket, other important themes that we can address at the city scale relate to natural and water resources, ecological systems, food systems, and waste management. And transportation is its own bucket here as well, because it is an important contributor to carbon and carbon emissions. There are other environmental, social, and economic factors that we should be considering for sustainable futures as it relates to transportation. And the same is true for resilience. Climate resilience is one aspect, but a holistic resilience strategy also looks at things like energy reliability, critical infrastructure assets, and economic resilience. And so the comprehensive plan will be exploring all of these themes and looking at each of the chapters that make up the plan. So if we come back to applying the sustainability resilience glasses to the comp plan, I just want to give one example of how this might come together and how it'll work. And I want to use the example of the last chapter, future land use. And when we think about land uses in the city and we put on our sustainability resilience glasses, we might see relation to a lot of the themes that I was just talking about. How land use that requires cars to move around also increases carbon emissions. How pervious pavements within a development impact flooding or water quality, and how which land gets developed is very much related to which land gets preserved. And some examples, these are just examples, these are not written in stone yet, of some of the opportunities or strategies that might come from an analysis like this are shown on the bottom here. So we might want to encourage denser development in downtown in order to preserve ecological habitat and others. We might recommend green and resilient design guidelines for those developments. And there are really several more. And that's what we want to hear from you all tonight is what are your ideas for building these themes into each of the chapters of a comprehensive plan? But before we do that, as Bob mentioned, we have some really fantastic speakers who are doing incredible work in Saco, and I want to highlight them and give you all a chance to hear the inspiring work that they're doing. And so first up, we'll hear from Tom Clack. Let me just pull up the bio. So Tom is a 4-year member of the Saco Conservation Commission and is the Vice President and Chair of Gene Conservation at the Maine chapter of the American Chestnut Foundation. He is also a professor in the School of Marine and Environmental Programs at the University of New England. So Tom, if you're there, I have your slides up so you can just chime in when you're ready.
Ready to go. Okay, so so much to talk about on the topic of sustainability. It's huge. I think, as Bob said earlier, it's really, really important and should be something we think about every single day, to be honest. So I think most people in this group know that there was very significant declaration signed last September that I think is absolutely central to the question of sustainability in our fair city. And so I think it's worth reviewing what the declaration says and think about how these ideas and these goals and these strong statements of purpose in the resolution could be incorporated into the comprehensive plan going forward and acting on the strong statements that were made. With a lot of back and forth going back, this is passed in September of 2020, but a lot of back and forth over many months before that, and initiated originally by middle school kids, Saco middle school kids. I think it's very important that the young people were motivated to put this together with help from their teacher for sure, but motivated to put together the resolution. So the whole thing can be read on that website. And passed unanimously by all 7 counselors in September. So I'd like to just review that briefly. If we can go to the next slide. So, so Howard, obviously one of our people here, deeply involved in the drafting. So it ended up on a full 3rd draft. I'm a member of this Conservation Commission. As April mentioned, we went over it fine-tooth comb, made a lot of comments, a lot of suggestions along the way. And this was the introductory letter. I'm just kind of excerpting a few things to kind of give a feel for what the declaration says and how we can actually think about implementing it on the topic of sustainability. So it says here, you know, back and forths. It incorporates oversight buy-in with the city administrator, realistic deadlines and resiliency measures in the declaration. There'll be need for future resources, but this third and final version of the resolution allows for additional time to pursue future funding. And the staff sees as a modified version that better meets the city's as well as the students' expectations. Okay, so let's take a quick look at a few parts of it to just, some of it, this will be kind of reviewing because I, to be honest, haven't looked at it in months myself after reading it many times over prior to September. So I think it's worth taking a glance at. So the first part of this declaration lays out some of the serious issues of climate change and impacts that we need to have in the backs of our mind. This is stuff that's going on all around us. We don't want to go over 1.5 degrees Celsius. All the scientists that study this very carefully said that would be a real tipping point. Second point about the sixth mass extinction is worth noting. We've got some real issues in terms of wildlife endangerment. And it ties in right down to some issues here. Bird populations are down a third. We've lost like several billion birds in terms of the total population over recent decades. Things are happening. We're already at 1 degree Celsius above pre-industrial, and we're beginning to see all kinds of things in terms of impacts. Bigger hurricanes, that's already been predicted for this year again. Droughts, wildfires, extreme weather. And of course, the Gulf of Maine, everybody here knows, is warming faster than everywhere on Earth, except for the Arctic. But it's tied to the Arctic. The Labrador Current has shifted off course, offshore. And so a lot of stuff is happening that is impacting us immediately and will impact us even more in the near future. Go to the next slide, April, please. So there's some key things in here. The council has already committed to a goal of sustainability that went back to the amendment of the 2018 comprehensive plan. The city recognizes a need for action, collaboration, and coordination. The city, this is all part of the declaration. City commits to a citywide mobilization effort to combat global warming and the ecological crisis, prioritizing zero carbon solutions, accelerating local adaptation and resilience strategies in preparation for intensifying local climate impacts. And obviously we've been seeing that over the decades in Camp Ellis. We've lost, what, 38 homes. Of course, the jetty plays a big role there. Need to get that fixed. City of Saco commits to educating Saco residents about the consequences of climate change, including the need for financial resources and regulatory oversight. Okay, with the aim of reducing and eliminating ultimately greenhouse gases. Next slide, April. This is the last of the pieces of the declaration I thought really worth highlighting. Saco City Council directs the city administrator to review opportunities for greenhouse gas emission reductions and sustainability and resilience. Saco City Council requests the city manager to investigate creation of a comprehensive training plan for all city department directors about potential energy efficiency gains and report back to City Council on that. City Council tasks all city commissions to develop greenhouse gas emission reduction plans within planning and permitting, energy and sustainability, budgeting, coastal waters. Okay, so very comprehensive to look at greenhouse gas reductions and eventual elimination. Super strong statement of focus on sustainability. City of Saco implements a program to encourage the use of non-polluting utilities such as solar panels, walking, biking initiatives, non-gas powered vehicles, energy efficiency. Okay, a really, again, comprehensive statement of focus on these sustainability issues. And the last one, City of Saco commits to engaging our residents and local stakeholders in education and public deliberations on the climate emergency. Okay, so yeah, lots in there, lots committed to, unanimous. So then this kind of leaves me then, okay, now what? Right, it says it was adopted unanimously back by City Council after a lot of back and forth back in September. How do these serious and substantial City of Saco commitments to take action on the climate crisis and enact an emergency mobilization to reduce and then eventually eliminate greenhouse gases get operationalized? So how do we do it? We said it, we committed to it, voted on it. How can City of Saco citizens and volunteers like the Conservation Commission that I'm part of, how can we play a productive role? How can we play a constructive role? What can we do? How do we engage to make sustainability a priority? And then focused on the plan, how can the comprehensive plan give teeth to the City of Saco's serious and substantial commitment to eventually eliminate greenhouse gases? So I think this is a chance for these very serious, very strong statements on the part of the City Council, the Energy Commission, the middle school kids, my group, Conservation Commission, all chiming in, stating a very loud and clear goal of working to meet head on the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and this opportunity, I think, for the comprehensive plan to reflect these very strong and important statements. And so I'd like to see us work on that. I'd like to be part of it. I think many people would like to be part of it. How do we go forward? Yeah, that's my intro comments. Thank you, April.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for that. Really inspiring and great to have you. You're such a great advocate in the city. Next up, we have Karina Grader. She is the Sustainability Coordinator with the Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission, which is a regional nonprofit that supports municipalities in Southern Maine. Karina works collaboratively with coastal towns to develop regional sustainability efforts and support local climate action. So today, she will be sharing the ways SMPDC is coordinating municipal climate action through their regional sustainability and resilience program.
Hi, everyone. Yes, thanks so much, April. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so as April said, I'm Karina Grader. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator with SMPDC. And you can go ahead to the next slide. So some of you may have heard of SMPDC before, some of you may not. Our office is actually located in Saco, and we are a regional planning and development commission. We serve 39 member municipalities, of which Saco is one. And we work to strengthen municipal government, advocate on behalf of our communities, help our communities leverage financial and technical resources, and also work to identify, investigate, and address regional issues. And so traditionally in the past, we have done this in the areas of land use planning, economic development, transportation planning. And more recently, we have started expanding that work into the areas of sustainability and resilience, and really started to work to incorporate those principles into all the work we do across all of our departments and projects. Next slide. So a couple years ago, I was hired to help start our regional sustainability and resilience program. And it's a little different than the traditional, land use planning technical assistance we've done, in that we're really trying to take a holistic and regional approach to these issues. And we're working to foster more sustainable and resilient communities in coastal York County by leveraging regional collaboration to enhance the effectiveness of local government sustainability and resilience action. And I won't get too into the weeds of everything we've done. This is just going to be like a brief overview. But so far, since getting started in early 2020, we've already worked on projects in the areas of renewable energy, energy efficiency, greenhouse gas emissions, climate change vulnerability, coastal resilience, stormwater management, sustainable transportation, and sustainable economies. So we've really tried to work on those efforts, both individually with the communities we work with, but also working collaboratively with multiple communities to tackle these challenges on a regional basis. Next slide. So I want to stay pretty brief here. And so the next few slides are just going over a few of the different projects that we've done to give you a taste of the sort of work we're doing. The first is our regional pilot program, which is how we got started. Back in early 2020, the towns of Kennebunk, Kennebunkport, Kittery, Ogunquit, York, and Wells all decided that they wanted to work on sustainability and climate change action, but that they couldn't do it individually, and rather than going out on their own, wanted to work with SMPDC to lead a regional effort. So that's actually how I got hired, was through pilot funding from these towns. They provided us funding for a 2-year pilot period going into January 2022. And I co-lead that program with our Coastal Resilience Coordinator, Abby Sherwin. So together we provide a lot of the technical assistance and facilitation and coordination for the program. And then the program works really closely with the staff in each of the 6 towns. We work directly with the town managers, or in one case, a designee of the town manager. And we meet on a bi-monthly basis with them. And we also work with the sustainability and resilience related committees in each of the towns. And all of our work is guided very clearly by a work plan we developed that was based on the priorities for each of the communities of what they hope to accomplish in these 2 years. Next slide. So after we got started with our pilot program, we've expanded our efforts to try and promote sustainability and resilience in all of our region in Southern Maine. And so we've had a couple different efforts relating to that. One is the Southern Maine Solar Collaborative that we are just wrapping up right now. This was a collaborative procurement effort for Maine municipalities to participate in Maine's net energy billing program. So the net energy billing program allows municipal and industrial customers to participate in community solar. Municipalities can offset their electricity with solar generated electricity from solar farms anywhere on the CMP grid. And a lot of our towns wanted to take advantage of this. So we got a different group of 6 towns together to do a collaborative RFP process to find one solar developer to purchase solar energy from. And the reason for doing it together was we could get better pricing options by aggregating our demand from the solar developers. It also really reduced the staff time and capacity needed to individually do an RFP process in each town. And it's been a really great opportunity for peer learning and support among the communities in this very fast and changing field of solar in Maine. Next slide. Another area where we focus a lot of our efforts is in sustainable transportation. Among many different projects we've worked on, we are also currently working on a municipal EV readiness toolkit. This will be an online resource on the Maine Clean Communities website to help Maine municipalities adapt to Maine's ambitious vehicle electrification targets. And it's not only looking at, incorporating electric vehicles into your municipal fleet, but also how can we encourage and direct the expansion of EV infrastructure through our land use planning, through permitting processes and other planning avenues like the comp plan. So that will hopefully be online sometime this summer. And then our goal is to provide technical assistance to our member municipalities who are interested to work through the toolkit and figure out what resources will be most useful for you. Next slide. And then another area where we've done a lot of work is coastal resilience. A lot of this involves some grant-funded projects, such as through the Maine Coastal Communities Grant Program. We've done a number of coastal flooding vulnerability assessments for towns in York County. And those assessments help provide locally tailored adaptation, mitigation, and resilience strategies specific to those communities for them to work on increasing their resilience to sea level rise and other coastal hazards. We're also helping draft a model coastal resilience ordinance that should be completed sometime this summer or early fall that towns can adopt and adapt to increase coastal resilience in their land use planning. We are also doing a project focused on economic and business resilience to storm hazards. And finally, we are working on a regional coastal resilience plan that includes the town of Saco, that's funded by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. It's going to be looking holistically across the whole region at what our most vulnerable areas are and what are some adaptation strategies and specifically some nature-based solutions that we can employ to increase the resilience of those vulnerable areas. Next slide. So I know that was like a whirlwind overview, and it really is only a small example of the different projects we've been working on. I hope that you take away from this is that SMPDC is here as a resource to Saco as you're going through this comp planning process. Whether you're looking at what are some things your community can do individually to incorporate sustainability and resilience into your comp plan, into your future actions as a community, or if you're looking for what sort of regional actions could be taken or what are other communities doing that you could potentially work with them or take best practices from. So we have a website, which is here. It's just off of the smpdc.org website. And we have a newsletter that we put out bi-monthly with a lot of resources as well as updates on what we're doing. The newsletter is actually going out tomorrow. So if you sign up tonight, you can get the next edition. And then always feel free to reach out to either me or our Coastal Resilience Coordinator, Abby Sherwin, and we'd be happy to talk with you about anything that you're thinking about doing in the town of Saco or for the comprehensive plan. So thanks so much.
Great, thank you, Karina. Next up, we have Howard Carter, who's the Director of the Water Resource Recovery Department for the City of Saco, Maine. He is responsible for the daily operations and maintenance, funding, staffing, licensing, and construction. And he's responsible for the city's resource recovery facility and 32 pumping stations. He also oversees the implementation of the Confined Sewer Overflow Master Plan and any separation or construction projects associated with that. He also, believe it or not, serves as chair of the city's Energy and Sustainability Committee and is a 2021 member of the Board of Trustees for the Water Environment Federation. And I'm actually cutting off his bio because there are many more accomplishments that Howard has in his bio, but Howard, I'll let you take it away from here. I have your video pulled up if you want to start with that.
And Howard, I believe you need to unmute yourself.
Thanks, April. We'll hold off on the video for just a second.
Okay.
I want to highlight some of the things that Tom brought up. He brought up some very good points, but some of the things that we've been working on for the Energy and Sustainability Committee for a number of years now have touched on a lot of those type of things. What we have done over the years and noticed is we just haven't really promoted enough what we've done in the past with the Energy Committee. So now we're trying to get more word out there, whether it's through the newsletter or just different videos we're having. But we spent a lot of time and resources on making all the heating and cooling and all the city facilities as efficient as possible, whether it's taking out old boilers and running in new gas boilers, or a big use of mini split heat pumps. And I think all you were really familiar with. And another thing we spent a lot of time on is lighting to really cut down on our carbon footprint. As a matter of fact, we're getting ready to award an RFP in the near future to change out all of the old street lights that we have and the old metal halide type things. So that should save a big savings to the city as well as reducing our carbon footprint. And we've also spent a lot of time working with Maine Power Options to reduce our electricity bills through different buy-in power. And as Katrina touched on, we've also looked at doing solar type things with different communities. We've had a lot of people come in, talk to us, whether it's Efficiency Maine or any of the energy providers. And we do have the first city-owned EV. We've got that down at the Water Resource Recovery Department. Very nice little car. We call it Zippy, and it's a great little thing. But one thing I do want to touch on, though, right now is a resiliency plan, which I think is very important for public infrastructure, especially around the buried assets that like to call them, your piping underground, everything that's susceptible to climate change. But it's not just sea level rise, it's the intense storms that come along with that. I think many of you, actually I know most of you on this presentation, can remember back in the 90s when we had that 18 inches of rain in the form of 3 days, and we wiped out the Jenkins Road. We took out part of Route 1. We blew force mains all over the place, and Joe Laveria is really familiar with that. That was just the beginning of it. But now I could probably, April, start this little video and I can show you just some of the things that are starting to happen down at the Water Resource Recovery Facility. This is about 1.5 years ago.
This is a shot of the Saco Water Resource Recovery Facility taken on Saturday, December 14th. On this particular day, we have received over 4 inches of rain with a flow coming into the treatment plant at over 13 million gallons a day. This is where the water enters the facility. As you can see, there's actually water cascading over the outside of the inlet structure to the headworks. This is due to the fact that from a high tide condition that we were actually bringing in more flow at over 13 million gallons a day than that was allowed to escape the plant because of the tidal condition. You can actually see the headworks facility where you do a lot of screenings and grit removal is just barely being contained. Here you see a shot of another structure prior to the primary clarifier that is overflowing as well and is running down around the back of the primary clarifier. Here is the primary clarifier flooding. You can see that the arm takes a lot of the grease and the floatable solids is submerged. Here is a picture of our aeration basins. On the clip down below, you can see them at a normal operating level, and the above clip shows them submerged as they are and flooded, and we actually had to shut the air off to help contain the solids within the system. Here is a secondary clarifier that is actually in its normal operating condition. Here is the same clarifier flooded due to the storm. As you can see, there's no weirs for it to cascade over, although we were able to contain all our solids to be well within permit. Conditions like this do cause operational concerns, and staff has to be very diligent to try to contain everything within the vessels. In my over 25 years of working at the facility, this is the worst flooding that I have encountered to date, and it certainly has its operational challenges, and we hope to abate that with future work. Shooting over to the Storm King, and this alone took it over 2.25 million gallons. One of the primary causes of this is that we had a high tide condition early in the afternoon, which did not allow all the flow to go out gravity. So in this instance, we were bringing in more water than the river was allowing to go out. This is why we want to set a case for having an effluent pump station to help stop this condition in the future.
Thank you, April. So since that time, we actually had Mayor Doyle appoint what we called the Coastal Resiliency Committee. We had a group of citizens, business owners and whatnot, join us as a stakeholder group and look at different ways that we can actually help to fix that facility. And we worked with the US EPA on that and went through 4 different scenarios.
Sorry.
The first,
More water than the...
Sorry about that. I'm trying to get it off the weird end screen.
That's fine. But one of the drivers of that was the cost of doing nothing. So, just let it go and ride it out. Now that has nothing, just doing that has nothing to do with the unprecedented growth that we're having in the city and the new requirements coming down from the US EPA and DEP on nutrient removal and other things. But the cost of doing nothing, if we took a big hit at the treatment plant with the high tide and the right storm, the cost of doing nothing, as projected by the Maine Climate Council, is $43 million. So this is a big project that we are now trying to go after federal money and stuff going forward. But I guess the driver for that is, out of the comp plan, I think we need to have some kind of climate adaptation or climate action plan come out of this. even if it's an addendum to that, we need something to address these things. I know the Maine Climate Council, there is legislation proposed. If you want to have any money coming from MEMA or the Climate Council address any of these things, you're going to have one of these plans if these LDs go through. There is one, we have a local one with York County MEMA, but I think it's probably time for the city to go on its own to have its own type of plan to address some of these things. With that, we'll take any questions. That's just a 10,000-foot view of.
Great, thanks, Howard. We'll save some questions for the end. I want to get to our next speaker. Last but not least, Drew Dumpsch is the founder and president and CEO of the Ecology School, which is a residential environmental learning center on the southern coast of Maine. Since its founding in 1998, the Ecology School has educated more than 187,000 children and adults and trained more than 350 ecology educators through the science of ecology and the practice of sustainability. So Drew, I have your slides here. I'll let you take it away.
Great, thanks, April. So I want to touch mainly on the Riverbend Farm project, our new campus in Saco, and entitled Living Buildings and a Living Community, the Sustainability Challenges, but Educational Opportunities of the Riverbend Farm project. Next slide, please. Just a little snapshot. As a residential environmental learning center, we're different than a nature center in that we encourage people to come and stay at Riverbend Farm, to take meals together, to stay in our dormitory. So we do that through school programs, overnight camps, bringing in adult educational programs and retreats, and then also with community partners. I'm happy to say I'm already working with SMPDC, and Karina has been at the campus, and then our neighbors, actually Tom Clack, and we've already done quite a few UNE projects with Tom. So that's two great examples just tonight of great community partnerships. Next slide. For years, we were down at renting the Ferry Beach Park Association site. So we were in essence a seasonal renter, but had wanted to buy our own site, and came upon the Ecology School at Riverbend Farm. This is a picture of the 1794 farmhouse, the 1840s barn. We're right on the Buxton border on actually a bend in the river. If you could do next slide. And this is actually an incredible drone photo from last summer as construction of our new campus in process. You can see the large farm fields we have and the bend in the river. This was taken right at dawn, but this is the expanse of Riverbend Farm. It's a total of 105 acres, and actually 96 of the acres are under a farm conservation easement with Maine Farmland Trust. Next slide. So the way we started the project, Riverbend Farm came on the market in 2015. We were interested immediately for the Ecology School to buy it as our new campus. We went through a 4-year process of master planning, bringing experts, including that photo in the middle. The gentleman with the big white beard is Tom Wessels, the famous landscape ecologist. We had agronomists come in, and really getting a sense of what other agricultural and environmental science and sustainability centers had done for education, and taking the best of them and also working hard to break new ground in that. So next slide. One way to do that was through master stakeholder meetings, and we brought teachers, students, board members, designers. This is a picture of our board room in the farmhouse, and actually sitting there right in the middle is Speaker Ryan Fecto. He was part of the master planning, and Ryan is actually a former student. When he was a 5th grader at CK Burns, he came and did a residential program at the Ecology School. Next slide, please. It's great. I mean, April really teed up the whole idea of like the defining sustainability and resilience. I have two different but similar definitions. Sustainability is meeting the present without compromising the future. And that includes not only humans, but ecosystems. Resilience is the capacity of a system whether it be the city of Saco or individuals or forest ecosystem or economy to deal with change. And I think to do that, embracing sustainability is one of the main tools to achieving resilience. Next slide. So when the college of school was looking at building a new campus, we really embraced the Living Building Challenge out of it's a program of the International Living Future Institute in Seattle. Many of us are familiar with LEED, Green Building Certification. What I like to call the Living Building Certification is LEED times 100. It's the most rigorous building and development certification in the world. In fact, we are not, even though our buildings have been finished, we have to now go a whole year proving that we're meeting those metrics. And I love, they use the metaphor of a flower, that a flower in a field is sustainable, it holds down the soil, it provides nectar. And what if we actually took the flower as a metaphor of how we should be building in communities? Next slide. And one way to do that is to go carbon neutral. We worked with Revision Energy to build a 256 kilowatt solar array. This is on the field and actually came out looking like a myelin sculpture because our hill is curved, but that's 512 panels. And then we have another 200 on our dining commons, providing 330,000 kilowatts a year. That's the equivalent of 50 to even 60 homes worth of electricity. Next slide, please. For the panels on the dining commons, this is the porch of the dining commons. We actually have these reality windows where you can look up. The light is dappled down through the solar panels, but to remind you that everything that's powered by electricity in the dining commons is getting powered right on the roof of that building. Next slide. Also, another way to approach resiliency and sustainability were our project goals for materials that we wanted to build with 1,000 materials or less. That is actually quite hard to do. Buildings often have 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 components. We wanted local Maine products that would be primarily Forest Stewardship Council certified wood for sustainability, bio-based materials, in most cases wood, and low cost for a living building challenge. Now, definitely green building adds a cost premium, but we wanted to model not a Rolls Royce, but a sturdy Subaru that was cost affordable, but modeled what we needed. Local Maine designers were brought in. These are all local, actually Richardson Associates. It's right in Saco. Next slide. And here's the outcome. Here's our dining commons, the Poland Spring Education Dining Commons, a dining hall that fits up to 200 people sitting meals. And to the right, that smaller part of the building is the all-electric commercial kitchen, a feat that has really not been done in the US for a commercial kitchen that can create meals for 150 people sitting down to a meal. Everything's electric, the griddles, the ovens, the broiler, it's all electric, including the dishwasher, of course, which uses plenty of electricity. And in the background, you can see the dorm. Next slide, please. That dining commons is 7,000 square feet. And this is actually the interior, both the model, and then I've superimposed it with a photo recently of folks sitting in the dining commons. I want to point out those wood beams are glue laminate beams, composite laminate timbers that are made out of strips of wood. And I should hope that at some point soon, Maine will start manufacturing these. These are actually local, bi-regionally local from a Quebec firm called Nordique. Next slide. And here's our dormitory. I want to point out that the land we used for this construction of the dorm and dining hall was the small part of the property not under conservation easement with Maine Farmland Trust. In fact, this was a horse meadow on ledgy clay soil, so we weren't even taking any of the more productive soil, farming soil away. And we built right up against the trees, so very few trees were actually taken down. This is a 9,000 square foot dormitory with 36 rooms of 2 bunks each, and it's passive solar, meaning it's super insulated. In fact, there's a chance in the winter we'll be running air conditioning, not heat, because they're so tightly constructed, and that's all FSC, Forest Stewardship Council, white pine from Hancock lumber, as is the framing. Next slide. So sustainability and resilience together, I've been talking mainly about the Living Building Challenge, certifying the buildings themselves, but there's a wider living community challenge that the International Future Institute does that I'd like to share just a few of the highlights, because I think it's significant in what's been shared already by Karina, Howard, and Tom. There's 20, what they call them, imperatives for development. I'm not going to share all of them, but this is just a quick list of how we touch agriculture, habitat exchange. We're actually going to put, for every acre we developed for Riverbend Farm Project, we'll put more land under easement, things like net positive energy. We're creating more energy at Riverbend Farm than we're using, and we're doing that without any combustion. Our carbon footprint by using local materials. I'll skip to a couple of the interesting ones. 17, equitable investment, that any investments are in actually organizations that have low carbon footprint. Just organization number 18, we're actually going through an equity, inclusion, and diversity audit as part of the certification. Beauty and spirit, that we can be resilient and sustainable and beautiful at the same time. And then number 20, inspiration and education. It's part of the certification. We're supposed to open up the campus once a year for education. And I think we'll do that times 365, because the Ecology School at Riverbend Farm will be doing that year round. I do want to point out one of the most exciting parts of the project is our agroecology and education program. Riverbend Farm is a working farm. We already have 1.5 acres under cultivation and farm staff that are beginning to grow crops. Our goal is by 2025, 100% of the produce we grow will be grown, or served in the dining hall will be grown on site. And we have a large root cellar in the basement of the kitchen. And we'll be partnering up with local schools and soup kitchens and food banks to work with them too on food security. So that's just one example. Resiliency and sustainability can be combined in just 105 acre property. Next slide. Thank you. Great. That's it. And thank you, April. You got me to get it down to 18 slides, and I did it. So hooray. I had twice as many to share, but happy to share what I could.
Thank you so much, Drew. And thank you to all of the speakers. Really inspiring work in the city and regionally. It's really, a lot of your work is a model for so many places in the US, really. So Saco is lucky to have you all. Now we want to move into to hear from everybody on the call. And Phil, are you still around? I can't see if there were any questions. Okay. Yes,
I am still here. So I think given the group that we have, we might just stay with the one group here for the breakout discussion. April, I'll let you go through the questions you have prepped, and then if you'd like, I can take control and share my screen, and I'll just take notes as we go. But okay, if that works for you, great. We can get started.
Yeah, so I really just have 3 questions, but I want to have a really open conversation. I'm curious, I think we heard a little bit, before all of the speakers, what you all think is important in sustainability and resilience. I'd like to hear again, after all of everybody spoke today, what you're thinking about what's important. I want to know what your ideas are for the comprehensive plan, what should happen in the city, how should we incorporate all of these themes into the 12 chapters that we will be working on. And the last one is really, what are we missing? What have we not talked about that you want to be talking about? Yeah, what's important that we haven't touched on yet? So I'll give the screen back over to you, Phil.
All right. So we will start with that first question there and see if anybody wants to talk more about the answers you provided in that initial poll we had at the beginning. If anything new has come to you based on this presentation. You can either type your comments in the chat box or unmute yourself either is fine.
I guess we should also say if there are any questions for the panelists, we can, oh, iPad has raised their hand.
Hello, this is Jane, Jane Karen in Saco. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. So my opinion on answering these questions, I was feeling that the low impact development and water resources are really critical for the town of Saco. I think those are very, very important. All of the pieces were important, of course, but I'm not certain if there's a way to manage the natural resources and the attraction of what's attractive in the city of Saco and the development, so that there seems to be more of a balance. So really considering the impact on the environment and, you know, not always putting the cart before the horse, which is something that I tend to see happening. So whether it's infrastructure or the environment down on the beach, or, you know, anywhere on the roads, the walking and the biking and everything that we've touched on through this series, I think really prioritizing some of those items to look to the future will make Saco even more attractive, and not be so rushed in developing and just using all of the environmental resources. And I guess that's my strong opinion. Thank you.
Let me piggyback on Jane's comment real briefly, because as we know, there's a strong new demand for housing and in migration to Maine, COVID related, right, with all the telecommuting. And I wonder about how Saco is and will be dealing with, on the one hand, demand, which is attractive for property tax, but on the other hand, having some control and some vision so that we don't overdevelop, because the pressure right now for land and housing is particularly strong, and it's going to continue.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate your comments on that. It sounds great. It adds to what I was trying to say. Thank you.
This is Bob Hamblin. I'm curious, with all the building and the newfound interest in moving to Maine, what communities, or perhaps what states in our country have taken steps toward requiring greener buildings, increasing efficiency of buildings. I don't know at the, for instance, the code enforcement office level, have communities in this state or elsewhere required more efficient buildings? Is it trending in a good direction or not? And if not, I wonder why local communities can't start moving in that direction. Working in the planning office as I do, whether it's residential building, single family homes, or multifamilies, or commercial buildings, they are just flying off the griddle right now, folks. It's very busy and new buildings are going up all the time. And I'm just wondering, can they be built more green, more efficiently than they are currently? And if so, perhaps the community should consider moving in that direction.
Bob, I guess one example is the relatively recent pretty landmark legislation in New York City that is requiring every single building that's greater than 25,000 square feet in the city to meet carbon emissions limits. They have a it's a carbon intensity factor that every single building has to meet in a tiered manner. So that is moving. I think it was one of the larger bills of its kind, but it might be a good precedent to look at.
Bob, also coming from a planning perspective, I was just talking to Dylan Smith in the town of York, and they are developing a green enterprise overlay district for their zoning, where they're going to have requirements for green buildings and energy efficiency, incorporating low impact development, and incorporating that in part of also with like mixed use development requirements and electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So it might be something to talk to him about and see where they are in that process.
Huh, very interesting. Thank you.
Let me ask a question to Howard or others. Howard, you mentioned the vehicle that the EV vehicle that had been purchased. That's great. I recently heard about the additional incentive for EV purchases by Li Auto, another $7,000 incentive specifically for municipality on top of the Efficiency Maine incentives and the federal subsidies. It would be wonderful if our City of Saco fleet could model for all citizens how to transition to EV vehicles. And can you give us a little bit of comment, Howard, on whether we could move more aggressively in the direction of EV fleet?
I'm not going to speak for the Public Works Department, but I think you're going to see that movement that way. I think Pat and the crew probably want to make sure that the vehicle's going to hold up, because there's nothing more we want to have than a snowstorm and the fleet won't run and those types of things. But I certainly think that'll happen. We actually got one of those Chevy Bolts down at the treatment plant, and through Efficiency Maine office, we had a $37,000 car. I think we picked it up for like $20,000. That's been a good deal. And we've talked about those of the Energy Sustainability Committee, and I think there's definitely a way that we want to go, Tom, with that. It's just when are we going to do that? I think it will be sooner than later. I think the way things are going, I see today that new Ford pickup truck come out. That looks pretty amazing. So I don't think it's going to take long. I think that's one of those things that will probably take care of itself, I would think. But I'm not going to speak for Pat. But did that really answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I from my perspective, I think there's just urgency, sustainability urgency. We have to act. We can't let it happen. We have to do it. And this is, I think, an opportune time with the new comprehensive plan to really move more aggressively, to be a model. I think I'd also maybe ask Drew about this, because we've got a model for sustainability right in our city. The ecology school now is a model for sustainability on all dimensions, as he so well articulated in his presentation. How can Drew and the ecology school and their staff offer guidance for all of Saco and beyond, really, but we're talking about Saco tonight. How can it be a model for us to transition to sustainable living? Drew, can you reflect on that at all?
Sure, thanks, Tom. I think part of, because we are a residential environmental learning center, it gives us the chance for people to break bread together and talk and dive in on topics. In fact, we're currently talking with Karina and SMPDC about potential grant funding to host municipal councils and planning boards to give them the training they need. Because I can tell you our process to get to where we are now at Riverbend Farm was 27 municipal meetings. And while we did successfully finish construction, there were definitely times where our level of wanting to embrace carbon neutral and resiliency and sustainability was met head on with current zoning, both municipal and then permitting at the state level. So a lot of it's in education, getting both municipalities and state and federal governments to keep up with the real innovators that are out there wanting to make the change and meet those climate targets and create healthy, resilient, and sustainable communities.
So are there other thoughts from others in terms of particular ideas that you have for incorporating themes of sustainability and resilience across the comprehensive plan? Thinking back to those 9 principles that I talked about at the very beginning, sustainability and resiliency are 2 of the principles, but they do touch on not just transportation and housing and land use, but the economy, open space, all of these things. So just curious to see if anyone has other thoughts on particular ideas, recommendations, things you've heard of in other other places in Maine or across the country that we should be considering in this.
Drew, Bob Hamblin once again. The term best management practices comes to mind, BMPs for short. And why I mentioned that is in my field, planning, we're always aware there's a wheel out there, so we don't have to invent one. I'm curious as to increasing awareness locally of how best practices are taking place elsewhere. And in particular, I guess I'm sorry to say, but I look to other parts of the world. Are European countries ahead of where we are in this country in terms of sustainability and resiliency? I don't know if you would think that perhaps information along these lines has been compiled already, and there are best practices that can be tapped into and employed. It's not so long ago, and Howard, Joe, a few others on this call will recall, 15 years ago when Saco considered itself to be perhaps the greenest community in Maine, and very progressive in terms of paying attention to greater energy efficiency, et cetera. No reason this city of 20,000 can't get back to that point and get to the point of demonstrating to others how it can be. So best management practices, what are others doing, and what can we adapt here in Saco?
Bob, I think that I brought up the International Living Future Institute, but for a real kind of think tank nonprofit that's really pushing the boundaries of best practices and what we should be heading toward in terms of development and community resiliency, I would encourage folks to check out the International Living Future Institute as a very interesting organization that's grappling with this. Of course, that's the folks we're working with on our certification, both for our buildings and for our overall Riverbend Farm.
I'd like to see our zoning, the city zoning ordinance, move toward incentivization to help us move in a more sustainable direction. This language is not in the new zoning ordinance at this point, but there's nothing to say that it couldn't be. If a developer wants to build green, then allow them to create a more dense development, allow more residential units, for instance, if that's what they're after. Find ways to create incentives for more sustainable development. And that means getting into the zoning ordinance and making some significant changes.
Let me throw out another idea. Howard mentioned, well, he can speak for the water resource recovery. It seems like there would be great value to have more coordination across the agency staff, the different commissions in the city of Saco, and on the goal, the sustainability goal. And how does that happen? Well, it could happen by moving in the direction of a sustainability coordinator. that would be tasked, because everybody's so busy, you know, and a major constraint is how do you work these major sustainability and resiliency goals into what you're doing full-time already. There are 2 cities in Maine right now that have sustainability coordinators. Portland has Troy Moon, South Portland has Julie Rosenbach. And as a start, I would strongly recommend speaking to either of those people who are tasked with really bringing together the possibilities of sustainability across the agencies, across the different parts of a municipality, which is complex. And again, everybody's real busy, but we can take steps forward by trying to move in that direction of a sustainability coordinator that could focus on carrying out and helping coordinate the transition to a more sustainable city.
April, we have just a couple of minutes left. I was wondering if you could maybe just talk to some of the, you know, either work that you are currently doing or some of the examples you've seen from other comprehensive plans of the types of strategies and recommendations that other places are considering at this point. It's a field that is obviously rapidly changing and evolving, you know, broadening its lens to look at a variety of different things. So not to put you on the spot, but are there just a couple examples of things you've seen that, you know, would be, you know, worth exploring as we keep moving forward here?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because sustainability has been around for a very long time, but I think in the planning world, and as it comes to comprehensive plans, even the American Planning Association has only more recently provided guidance and recommendations for building it into a comprehensive planning process. I think the previous iterations of sustainability have been very much focused on the built environment and how we generate renewable energy. It has been a big focus. So it's increasingly being seen in these kind of large city scale plans. I think the really good ones draw parallels between the types of buildings that get developed in the city. So kind of like what Bob was mentioning on how to incentivize greener development, but also linking that back to all of the other things. So how does the way that a city builds relate back to a transportation system? Oh, my headset's about to die, so I hope I can get this out. But you know, if 50% of your emissions are coming from combustion engine vehicles, we might have to consider what types of development might not require vehicles in the first place to get around. A lot of cities are starting to think about and look at that. It's harder in practice to do than some other things like putting solar panels on a roof, but those are really great things. I am seeing more resilience design guidelines coming out, largely at the city scale. So that could be a recommendation. I think kind of building on the work that Karina is doing is the regional cooperation is really, really critical. And I think especially as we're talking about these big issues like sustainability and resilience, you know, you don't exist in a pocket, you don't exist in isolation. And so SACO can have an even broader impact by bringing in that regional collaboration and also make it easier for the city to do things. So yeah.
Absolutely. And the regional coordination is part of the comprehensive plan as well, you know, because it's not just sustainability and resiliency, but it's also, you know, transportation and, you know, housing and things like that. Economic development certainly crosses city boundaries. So the regional coordination aspect is an important part of the comprehensive plan. And I would also say, you know, the fiscal capacity of the city as well. And so there's definitely the fiscal or financial aspect of, you know, recommendations in the comprehensive plan and making sure that we have ways to balance both the revenue and the cost side, because the fiscal health of the city in the long run is important, and finding ways to grow more sustainably to reduce energy costs, some of the things that Howard mentioned, and find ways to be more resilient to bounce back when shocks to the system do happen. Those are things that can help strengthen the city's bottom line over time. So I think just, again, the interconnectedness of the principles that we're looking at, how sustainability and resilience can be applied across all of the areas that we're considering within the comp plan are just important things for us to keep in mind as we move forward and begin to develop specific recommendations. And so with that, we are coming up at 7:30. Were there any final questions or comments?
Emily has her hand up still.
Oh, all right, Emily.
I just want to say that I think it's a great time to get together as a community and use the comp plan as a tool to determine what the definition of sustainability and maybe of resilience will be for Saco in the long term. So then you can start implementing those items from the comp plan and do what Bob said with incentives, focus on the not only what the city's doing, but use some of those as examples to show developers of what Drew is doing and what others are doing. So I really enjoyed tonight's presentation, but I also think that this is a great opportunity to move forward together. Thank you.
Great point, thank you. So with that, I'm gonna bring us to a close here. First of all, just thank everybody for your time tonight. A special thanks to our panelists for participating and sharing what you're working on, what you're thinking about. We really appreciate that diversity of perspectives. Thank everybody for attending tonight as well. And leave you with just 2 online resources. First, encourage everyone to check out our online ideas forum on our interactive website. The link is here on the screen. It will also be available in the PDF of the presentation that will be posted online. But on there, we have a couple of questions kind of organized under these 4 topics that we've hosted meetings on. And just really looking forward to hearing additional ideas, opinions, thoughts on those things. It's also a chance to see what other residents are saying and comments on that as well. So look forward to your input there. And then finally, just the city's comprehensive plan website is where we will be posting this recording and the presentation itself for review later on. So keep tabs on that for future updates. And we just look forward to moving this forward. As I said at the very beginning, kind of where we're at in the process, this topic exploration phase is where we are developing our initial set of strategies and policies that we'll be considering. We'll be working with the Long Range Planning Committee and city staff to sort of develop those and fine tune those. And then there will be other opportunities in the future to hear from all of you and fellow residents to get a sense, make sure that those strategies and policies are in the right direction, that we have a shared sense of where we want to be in the next 10 to 15 years. So with that, I will wrap us up. Thank you again for your time. April and I will stay on for a few extra minutes. If anybody has any other questions or comments you'd like to ask, we'll stay on for a few minutes. But with that, thank you very much. Have a great evening, great weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you all.
All right, April.
Well, it's weird when I'm presenting, I can't see anything happening on Zoom. So I also closed Teams and my